All right, so today we're going deep.
Deep.
Deep, yeah, into
That's
some pretty choppy waters, I think, huh?
yeah.
We're going to be taking a look at all the controversy surrounding French-European lawmaker Rima Hassan
Mm-hmm.
and all of her statements about the Palestinian armed resistance.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's a big one for lots of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sparked a lot of different things: outrage, debate, even questions about,
Yeah.
what's okay to even say anymore when it comes to free speech. And
Right, where's the line?
where's the line? Exactly. Especially when you're talking about political activism and even terrorism.
Right, absolutely.
So we have all these different layers to unpack here. I mean, first of all, just what did she say?
Right.
And then what was the backlash and why?
Yeah.
And then, all this historical context she's using to try and justify her position.
Yeah.
And then even the biggest question of all, which is can you go around telling people it's okay to go join an armed resistance and still be
Right.
considered a legitimate part of the political discourse?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's a big question.
It's a huge one. So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's just dive in. So Hassan's whole argument is that Franco-Palestinians, they should have the right to go join this Palestinian armed resistance. Just like Franco-Israelis,
Okay.
they're allowed to go serve in the IDF, right? But here's the kicker. Here's the thing. She claims that the legitimacy of this whole Palestinian armed resistance thing, it's actually backed up by UN resolutions on self-determination. And to make matters even more,
Provocative. Yeah.
She even says something like this. She says, the only thing that prevents you from considering it is the coloniality of the world.
Whoa.
Whoa, right.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement.
It is.
And it's throwing down the gauntlet.
It is. It is.
It's directly challenging, the dominant narrative in Europe, and framing this as a matter of equality and self-determination for the Palestinian people.
Okay, but before we even go into all of the reactions, what are these UN resolutions that she's talking about? Help us understand what she's basing her argument on.
Yeah, so she doesn't actually name specific resolutions,
Right.
but it's very likely that she's alluding to one in particular, UN General Assembly Resolution 3236, which affirms the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, including the right to struggle by all means for independence.
Okay.
There's also Resolution 3743, which recognizes the legitimacy of the Palestinian struggle.
Got it.
And these resolutions, they're often cited to support the argument that Palestinian armed resistance is legally and morally justified.
Okay, that's really helpful context.
Yeah.
But, I mean, come on, there's going to be pushback against her stance.
Oh, absolutely.
Huge pushback.
Huge pushback, right.
And one of the loudest voices coming out against Hassan is CRIF.
The Representative Council of Jewish Institutions of France.
Right.
And they're essentially trying to just shut her whole argument down by equating it with support for globally recognized terror groups.
Oh, wow.
They say, and this is a quote, "Can you imagine a European MP calling for people to join Al-Qaeda or ISIS?"
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's a powerful rhetorical tactic. It's designed to portray her as just beyond the pale.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really aggressive comparison.
It is.
They're really trying to frame this as like a black and white issue.
Totally.
Yeah.
And CRAF goes even further.
Yeah.
They argue that if Hassan actually truly supported peace,
Right.
she would be fighting against Hamas,
Right.
not defending their actions.
Okay, hold on. We haven't even gotten to Hamas yet.
Right.
But she has made statements in the past defending their actions, hasn't she?
She has, and this is where things get even more complex.
Yeah.
Because she previously referred to Hamas's attacks on October 7th, 2023 as legitimate. Oh, wow.
So just to recap for our listeners, that was a horrific event where Hamas violated a ceasefire, they invaded Israel, and they just carried out these brutal attacks that killed 1,200 people.
It's awful.
And resulted in over 250 abductions. It was just a devastating act of terrorism.
Totally.
And it continues to have repercussions even today with ongoing rocket attacks, hostage situations, and further acts of violence claimed by the Palestinian armed resistance.
It's hard to see how anyone could call them legitimate. I mean, that just seems to completely disregard the suffering
Exactly.
and the loss of innocent life.
And that statement That statement has come back to haunt her, especially in light of her more recent pronouncements. It's fueled accusations that she is, in fact, supportive of terrorism, regardless of how she tries to frame it within the context of self-determination.
Okay, so how does this all connect back to the historical context that she's always bringing up?
So, Hassan argues that European nations bear the primary responsibility for the Palestinian tragedy.
Okay.
She points to a history of European anti-Semitism, which she sees as a precursor to the Zionist movement and the subsequent displacement of Palestinians.
Okay.
She also criticizes the Sykes-Picot Agreement, a secret deal between Britain and France that carved up the Middle East after World War I, ignoring the aspirations of the people living there, including the Palestinians. And this agreement is often seen as laying the groundwork for the conflict that we see today.
So she's saying you can't really understand what's going on now unless you acknowledge this historical backdrop of colonialism and broken promises?
Exactly. She's arguing that the Palestinian struggle is a direct result of these historical injustices inflicted upon them. She wants people to understand the roots of the conflict, which she believes justify the Palestinian armed resistance.
Yeah, it's a very compelling argument. I mean, even if you totally disagree with her conclusions, it makes you think about how the past is affecting the present.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really tricky, because while understanding the historical context is so important, it doesn't necessarily justify violence or support for groups like Hamas, which are classified as terrorist organizations by many countries, including France.
Yeah, and the consequences of her statements have been huge, right?
Absolutely massive.
I mean, she reportedly even appeared at a pro-Hamas rally in Amman, which led to like 50 French National Assembly members demanding that the European Parliament lift her immunity.
Wow.
So they clearly believe she's crossed a line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this brings up the fundamental questions about the limits of free speech.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, can you really call for people to join an armed group, even one with a complex history and political context, and still be considered, part of acceptable political discourse? Or does that cross into incitement or even support for terrorism?
It's a tough question.
It's a huge question. This whole situation is a minefield. And I don't think there are any easy answers.
Yeah, there aren't. There really aren't. But that's why it's so important to engage with these issues, even when they're uncomfortable.
Yes.
Don't just accept any single narrative. Dig deeper, explore the historical context, and consider the potential consequences of different viewpoints.
And maybe the biggest question to ask yourself is this. Does understanding the long and tangled history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict change how you view current events and political statements like Hassan's?
That's a great question.
It is, right. It's a question that requires, I think, a lot of careful consideration and a willingness to actually grapple with maybe some uncomfortable truths.
Totally.
Yeah. So there you have it.
There it is.
Another deep dive.
Another deep
into some very, very choppy water.
Very choppy.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.